Hello and welcome back to Sinews of War. In the previous episode we saw an attack on the final French artillery fort at Strasbourg, fighting a deadly battle on the walls, eventually capturing it, meaning that the last French settlement was ours and France as a nation was destroyed, which conveniently removed their main force from near Paris. The Genoese sallied out for a second time against Vos. It wasn't even engagement, but our superior training and ability to deploy cav against the enemy meant we won pretty easily. Finally, we saw Nassau starting a war against Louisiana. As we marched in to fight their initial forces, there was a hidden army out in the forest, meaning now he faces a difficult battle. Well, sir, I think you have it wrong. It is, as much as you might dislike it, still the role of the stat holders to make decisions of military action on that level. What do you mean, on that level? We are free to engage in any enterprise we see fit, military or economic. Well then I say that I do not see an invasion of India to be fit, militarily or economically. How exactly is this meant to work? I don't see why you think you're in a position to comment at all. A sailor's mind is not one suited for politics. I beg to differ, Mr. Grotius. We are forced on a daily basis to— Be quiet, I say! You have already forfeited your right to comment by admitting you can't even conceive of how an invasion would happen. It takes no less than a day's reading of the missives from the continent to see that the Mughal Empire are beginning to beat the rebels, and that they wish nothing more than to have our aid in finishing them off. If we accept that deal, then we will be able to take part of India for ourselves. Yes, great that will be. We and the Maratha die fighting each other so that the Mughals can mop us up and take all the spoils. A fine plan, sir. I will prepare the ships at once. Your cheek will get you nowhere, man. Perhaps not. However, your plans to sell out our company will get you nowhere either. Remember that I have veto over the board, so you have no chance of getting this through. And remember also that I have personal command over the entire trade fleet in the East Indies. It's my men and the money that I pass on to you that you're thinking of sacrificing here. Finance your own army and do it, sure. Idiotic, but no less evil than what most armchair generals do. But there is not a chance in all hell that you will find me sailing for India without a much better plan or a letter from the king. We're here in Lower Louisiana for the decisive battle for Louisiana by the looks of it. The enemy have two reinforcement armies, a big one and a small one, so I'm starting with a pensive deployment infantry behind the artillery, waiting to see what happens. And actually, it was quite a bad reinforcement setup. The enemy's reinforcements coming on right behind my deployment zone. Fortunately, that was the smaller of the two armies, the bigger one coming on behind the enemy's deployment zone, their initial deployment there just being a couple of units, so really nothing to worry about. Frontally, we're going to have a while before their main reinforcements arrive. So the first part of the battle is basically going to be turning around our entire left flank to fight with the enemies now coming from behind us. Luckily, the enemy are charging in, so they're not going to get a chance to form up or anything. It's their general leading the way. He takes a volley as he comes in, loses a third of his men, but survives himself, and then successfully gets a heavy cavalry charge on those line infantry. Not going to be the end of the world. My own cavalry are nearby. Another cavalry unit attacks the next unit along, but now I'm going to use square formation, our recently research technique. This is going to give us improved attack against cavalry, so hopefully you can bring them down. You can only go into a square before the engagement, so the other unit is unable to do that. Unfortunately, you have to micro it a little bit. But I can use these natives as axe cav to just come in and attack the enemy's general, and the general himself actually dies at that moment anyway. It's pretty difficult for a general to beat line infantry in a straight engagement after the bayonets are researched, so he's going to struggle. The rest of his cav going to struggle as well. The square looking good, holding off the enemy's cav formation, and here come the pikes just to make sure we win this cav engagement. We've got archers coming up too. Not sure they're going to be very useful actually, because firing into that square they'll probably inflict friendly fire. These archers here, a little bit more useful perhaps in a hidden position behind the main line. They should be able to fire over the top at enemy infantry if they come in close. Here come the first units of infantry. This is from their initial deployment, I believe. And it looks like they're going to exploit the fact that I basically don't have a left flank, because they're heading right for the edge of the line there. All of the forces are currently still engaged because the enemy's infantry from their other reinforcement army are starting to arrive. Here coming in with a melee charge is Native Warrior Auxiliary, a powerful melee unit. They're not charging charging the unit closest to them, meaning they're running across the arc of fire of those two units. And they're paying the price, taking losses as they charge. It's not going to be enough to demoralize them though. They are going to get that final stretch of the charge and hit the line which was their original target. So that's now a problem. They are of course very good in melee and my troops will struggle to hold them off. I do have support though. The pikes that came in earlier can immediately come into rear attack those auxiliaries, so that's going to make it difficult for them and we should win as a result of that. They've got more infantry sneaking around the edge of my little echelon there. Got archers setting up to fire onto the flanks and light infantry coming around to fire onto the rear. Now that is a dangerous situation. On the main battle line, the cavalry from the enemy's main force are starting to arrive. My men firing like crazy to try and bring them down before they get in close, but it's not going to work. This unit of cav looked like it was going to absolutely slaughter my irregulars who are super weak against this sort of attack, but they turned at the last second to go and engage line infantry who are strong in melee against cav. So that was a very fortunate turn of events right there. The line infantry won't do too badly against those cav, and my own cav are going to be able to support. On the other side of the line, the enemy's still sneaking around the edge of my flank. I've got some irregulars back here, and the cannons will be able to engage them, so that should keep them away from this part of the battle, which is starting to go quite well. My pikes managed to destroy the enemy's melee troops, and charging after them after the rout, ended up getting drawn into combat with the enemy's line infantry, who set up, prepared a volley at the last second there, but it was too late. The pikes are already in, so now that's a melee that I will hopefully win. We will take pretty high casualties though. Nassau may be 70 plus years old, but he's going to charge in with his guards to destroy these light infantry, making sure they can't fire on us from behind anymore. We also managed to rout those archers with a little musket fire. Lots of losses here. You can see piles of Dutch bodies, but victorious in the end, and those troops can now move up to really surround the remainder of the enemy's second reinforcement army as they come onto the field and effectively destroy them. So the focus of the fight is now going to move back over to our initial position. The enemy making heavy cavalry attacks. Here a point-blank range volley from my auxiliary is trying to hold them off, but they're still going to struggle. The enemy's cavalry are pretty good. Here the enemy's general supporting his cav. My cav going into fight as well. We've got an infantry square supporting that position, but the enemy's cav not really focusing on it. And unfortunately for me, which I was a little bit perplexed by, the infantry square doesn't fire into the enemy's cavalry regiments even though they're right next to it. So that's a shame. The enemy's cav going to be surviving a little bit longer than usual. My irregulars were wiped out in that cavalry attack, running off to this Native American village. Only really appropriate because the game doesn't distinguish between Southern American and Northern American natives. The enemy's general dies in that cavalry engagement, then goes and sits in front of my square, a perfect chance for them to shoot down those heavy cav, but it's not happening. The good news at least is that their spearhead has been broken, and now the fight's going to be a little bit more in our favour. No need to panic. Enemy behind, enemy in front. There isn't a better situation for fighting. What do you do when it isn't safe to retreat? You give them hell. I discussed the notion with plenty of officers, but none of them had ever seen it happen. Apparently men just took their chances with running, even when it was certain death. Well, not these men. And you know what I think that means? These men are like the men of Rome's legions. Soldiers first, and men second. The pinnacle of their art. Yes, these men are something I shall be proud of, whatever my legacy might be. Now, let's leave matters of philosophy aside, for remember we must fight for our lives as well. Knowing that I do so alongside these troops rids me of all fear. Let's ride! The fight at the back of the map now coming to an end. Nassau using his heavy cav to run down those routing units to make sure they don't come back. The infantry engagement now won. Massive losses among our pikes, but you can see we had them totally surrounded with gun units and had just been cutting down enemies as they come onto the field. So now those troops are going to come back to try and rejoin the main battle. They're still getting slightly rear attacked by this small unit here, but it's not making a big effect. The irregulars are shooting at them, and we've also got these archers here hitting them with arrows and actually not really doing very much. I was expecting a lot more from the archers after we saw the French native archers doing so much damage to our forces earlier in the campaign, but their accuracy was very low upon closer inspection, so they basically missed all of their shots. Possibly that's something the AI gets a bonus on, and that's why it does so well. Now the main line is starting to engage with the enemy's infantry. The first arrivals are their melee troops, so it's another native warrior auxiliary charge, charging across a field of dead men and horses right into our lines, and that's going to be a pretty successful charge. Didn't really take many losses as they came in, and now just going to smash into the lines. Very damaging here. They just smash right through the line, cutting a path into the back lines where my archers are just setting up, so that will be able to stem them. The archers are okay in melee, but that's going to be a heavy losses engagement. I think we'll win though, just because we have sheer numbers on our side, and the line infantry with all their upgrades aren't all that bad. We've got cavalry left over from the cavalry fight earlier who are going to come in to try and damage the enemy, and that unit routes right away as the natives come in, and that's going to really expose the other unit as well to a rear attack. So we're going to start pushing them back. Our formation completely blown apart, but now starting to reform as the enemy just take too many losses. They couldn't sustain that engagement. They didn't have any support from the rest of the units following them, so eventually we beat them and are going to reform. Some nice friendly fire from that regiment firing into the routes as my cavalry try to cut down enemies. We really don't want them to come back. So now we have a massive advantage actually, because the rest of the enemy's infantry are just coming onto the field one regiment at a time, meaning we're always going to be fighting them one at a time if they just come straight into the lane. There are a couple of units left over from their initial deployment. These are regulars going to cut down these light forces here who are just skirmishing on the edge of the battlefield. So there they go, not even taking that many losses before routing, because the enemy's army morale is going to be pretty low right now considering the losses they've taken, including 2 generals. This unit just throwing their lives away as they run across the face of the line, probably hoping to make an attack on our left flank, but not realizing that in going over there in this particular part of the field they are going to be in range of the center, so taking losses fast. This unit behind them routing even before coming into combat, so you can see that basically the rest of this battle is just going to be a case of routing every unit as it comes up to the line. Our line now fully formed up, a double line of thick musket positions and archers. The enemy have no chance of getting through at this stage. So the battle pretty much just continued exactly as I said, taking one unit after another off the field, and there goes the final one, routing before the face of our musket line. So that's the end. It is a victory. It says here that the enemy only lost 500 men and we lost around 1,500. I think the stats don't include the effects on the reinforcement army. So we managed to kill half of their initial deployment, but we also killed lots of the enemy's reinforcements as well. So hopefully we'll see in a second the real results. The actual kills mostly inflicted by the non-standard units, the auxiliaries and the pikes, so another great performance for those units. Let's have a look at the real results. The truth turns out to be that the enemy lost more like 3,000 troops to our 1,500, so that is more like it. So I'm looking here at the battle stats. You can see once again there how the weirder troops seem to have done the most, although the pikes took extreme losses to get their high kill count. But what I was interested in seeing was the results from the archers, and they're actually right down the bottom of the table. Quite abysmal performances from the bowmen, not what I expected, as I mentioned earlier. So the bowmen not really coming in as useful as the other auxiliaries, and considering they cost pretty much the same amount, that is disappointing. The enemy seemed to make much better use of them than I did. So Louisiana's armies will now retreat away from their settlement because of that victory, leaving it exposed. And what makes that particularly juicy is the fact that Upper Louisiana, Louisiana's other territory, has for some reason been taken by Poland-Lithuania. I don't know if they bought it off them, Louisiana Purchase style, or if they're actually invading across America hoping to set up some colonies for Poland. What that means is that if we attack New Orleans right now, this is a chance to destroy Louisiana as a faction, which will of course destroy all of those regiments we saw escaping from the battle just now. Particularly important because their main force actually routed with most of its infantry still intact, so they pretty much still have a stack's worth of troops out in the fog of war. So we're going to try and just destroy the garrison in an immediate siege assault. We have the artillery advantage, so we're going to start by just firing in their general direction while we wait for the enemy to respond. Unfortunately, destroying some of the suspiciously Native American infrastructure here. Even though it's a European settlement on the map, New Orleans is apparently just a little tribal set of longhouses, so quite strange, but whatever. Right now, we're just going to wait for the enemy's infantry to come over to us because they know we have artillery advantage, and that's exactly what they do, so we can engage them in a line battle. We're going to have the advantage. You can see once again I put bowmen behind parts of the line to try and sneak shots over at the enemy. Parts of the enemy's lines going to be the garrison units like these firelocked armed citizenry. Not very good at all, already wavering as they come in, and then a lucky artillery hit right in the middle of their unit turns them back. The unit next door to them doesn't like the look of their flanks becoming exposed, turns around and runs as well. So already that's going quite well. They are going to come back from routing, of course, because they're still at relatively high strength. The actual line battling part will inflict casualties on our line, but my troops are simply better than the enemy's, and I'm going to have lots of freedom to maneuver, of course, as the enemy's force is smaller than mine. I also sent a team of cav to go and take out the enemy's mortars. The mortars not able to inflict any casualties on the cav as they came in, and among them is their commanding officer, so that's going to make life even easier. Another morale hit for the troops on the front line. You can see how they've come back here to fight again, but they're still wavering, so really it's just a case of getting a good volley on them to make them take a few losses, and that will turn them around. And there they go, right there, in fact. The archers doing a bit of damage there. They have pretty high range, so they're pretty good as a second line unit firing over the top of my men. My line getting very thin there. Some of these regiments are really damaged from the previous battle, so a little bit dangerous using them in the front line here, but I'm basically being reckless because I don't really need to take care against this army because it's so weak. And there we go, the entire army routs after a while. The enemy losing 10 times the number of troops that we did. Most of those probably just killed in the auto-resolve of the rout. So a fantastic result there. That means Louisiana as a faction has been destroyed, as we had predicted. So now the Dutch stand with no enemies in America and an army riding a wave of victories. If there was ever a true and present danger to the alliance, then this is it. Clearly the king is not going to comment on the proposed limits to the Dutch West India Company's expansion. Whether his silence reflects his inner conflict or inner complicity is yet to be determined. For now, we have only one real option, as I see it this evening. We must make a new war for them. A war in our interest if possible, but most importantly a war that will see any sites they have lain on the 13 colonies turned away. But in the longer term, the control of the Dutch menace will, I fear, prove to be beyond our present ability. So indeed, that is the end for Louisiana, as this message confirms the nation has been destroyed. And of course, we've now captured New Orleans. So we're going to repair up its building. It's got some nice roads already, so that's good of them. Our army in terrible shape. We can spend a heck of a lot of money to get it back into shape. I wanted to first take a look at our neighbours to see how much I need to do this. We've got the Pueblo nations, New Spain, Poland, of course, the Cherokee nations, and Spain nearby as well. So only really Spain potentially a threat right now, but of course we're going to have to invade somewhere to continue expanding the West India Company. So I thought I might as well just replenish the army right now and start thinking about what we're going to do with it. Also need to upgrade the province. Now here's a shot for regular viewer, Trip Fields. It's me recruiting some conscripts. I know you really wanted me to put some conscripts in one of my armies, so there they are. I hope you enjoyed that. And now back to some more important matters. Spain just declared war on me again, and for the second time they're calling in half the world in order to try and join this war. So this is a bit of a betrayal, considering we only got peace with them very recently, but I guess it's not entirely unexpected. And they had a full stack already prepared at Georgia, so they actually thought this war through this time. They immediately attack Florida with the stack. Lots of native troops in there, artillery and some decent cav as well. We've got 4 units inside, including a mortar team and a unit of bows. So the enemy really does have the potential to just overwhelm us here. They can attack the fort from as many sides as they want. We are, to start with, going to be able to hit them with our mortars. This is my first chance to actually use mortars. We've so often fought against them. But actually they have a bit of a problem when used defensively, which is that although you can see they get really good closeness of the shot, so if they did actually hit a regiment it would destroy them, they can't actually predict the movement of a regiment, so they can't hit them while they're attacking us. The enemy's artillery, which have deployed behind a hill, are just firing into that hill with the odd shot coming over towards the fort, and that's a massive advantage for us because now they can't just break down the wall. That's going to force them to actually climb up. Of course, we only have 2 infantry units on the wall, so we can only defend a tiny part of the fort at once, meaning even if they do climb up, they can easily climb up just on multiple sides in order to surround me. I'm going to use my cav, who are stationed outside the fort, to run down those stray bowmen I spotted out on the edge of the map. So the infantry have advanced up to the part of the fort that I'm defending, and we're going to start having a little bit of a line battle. My archers not really doing anything at all. The cavalry attack on the enemy's archers was very successful, actually, killing nearly half of them already. The losses on our side very tolerable for that level of kill, so that's fantastic. The mortars yet to hit anything, trying to target units that have now stood still, but they're getting quite close, so we are going to be hitting our own fort, basically, if we fight these units that are really close in, so the mortars not proving particularly useful. The main infantry attack, though, now started to come up the walls via the ropes, and crucially, again, the enemy putting these ropes here on the edge of the fort, but not using them. So after the artillery fail, this infantry fail is making the fight easier as well, so that's incredibly handy. If they just attacked multiple sides of the fort, our men on the top would have easily been surrounded, or they could have just gone in and taken the fort using the capture point. The enemy's archers, now destroyed by my cav, give me a chance to come back in and fire at the enemy who are trying to get around the side of the fort there. And the main battle on the fort's walls is really not something I can do anything about. The enemy's infantry just coming in to fight in melee. We'll just hope that something happens to make the enemy go back down, because if they just keep coming up those ropes, they will eventually defeat my line infantry. My archers will be able to come in to support if things get really bad. But one thing we can at least appreciate is that the enemy are only attacking up the ropes that are actually defended by my troops. Despite putting ropes elsewhere, they're attacking up the way that is best for me exclusively. So thanks to the AI for that particular move.
Kungliga silver från Spanien. Jag borde bättre ta en titt på det här innan hans majestät anländer. Hans kungliga höga kung Carlos av Spanien. Bla 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 bla. En koalition av nationer med namn nedan. Vad är poängen här? Men inte, kom igen, inte igen. Varför tror alla att den kommer springande till oss när holländarna kommer? Vad har vi gjort så att alla tror att vi kan behandlas som små bönder för dem att befalla? Ja, det är absolut inte något som kommer besvära kungen. I själva verket tror jag att det endast kommer störa elden från och med nu. Förra gången det hände signalerade Frankrikes fall. Ett fall i Spanien. Ja, det skulle vara någonting. Lycka till holländarna, ska jag säga.
A small team of Spanish troops seemed to be coming around the east side of the fort, but my native auxiliaries, having finished off those archers, are simply able to charge in and take out this small team of frontiersmen, most of them going down in the initial charge, triggering a massive morale shock right away. They're going to rout off the field immediately after the impact, so that's another unit dispatched. The main fight is going to continue as a grind, the enemy sending more and more troops up the ropes, and I'm now considering using my archers in melee as my initial line infantry unit starts to take damage. The enemy's starting to get a foothold there. It's possible that by pushing in the archers we could make a difference, but I noticed they finally actually formed up ready to rain arrows on the men below, so I thought we'll do that first. Not very effective though, only the front row fires and they're firing inaccurately, so actually probably better to be used in melee. Now my cavalry are going to come in to continue to attack the enemy's infantry on the ground here. The enemy getting a volley into my cavalry there, but most of the shots missed despite it being at point blank range, so that was very risky, but we got away with it. So now we're going to slaughter that irregular unit because their loose formation's ideal for the cavalry to just engage them all at once. Nearby, enemies now routing en masse, perhaps influenced by the touch of the cavalry, so that's changing the situation quite a bit. The ones who route up the ropes are going to be completely destroyed, of course, and actually that was most of the enemy's infantry wiped out in that cavalry charge, so the cavalry have done a really good job, but unfortunately the enemy has the same unit but at full strength, so when that unit comes in to engage them, they're in huge trouble. It's now going to be very difficult to save these cav. What I'm trying to do is bring them in underneath my archers and gunmen to try and fire on the enemy's horsemen. These guys haven't set up on the parapet ready to fire, so I'm giving them movement orders to see if they will set up. Normally they can't fire when they're on the wall unless they kind of deploy onto the side and start aiming over the edge, so a little bit annoying there. The archers are doing it, so their front row is going to get a few arrows into the enemy's formation, but that killing is going to be very slow, so really there's not much hope for my cavalry. They'll be killed in melee, they'll rout pretty soon, but we will of course get plenty of chances to hit the enemy, and that enemy cav unit isn't going to leave, which is the most important thing. After it defeats my unit, it just stays there, so my men can keep firing at it, and slowly but surely in a gunfight we're going to win. The enemy firing back are going to hit my cover most of the time, so we're going to gradually grind that cavalry unit down and get rid of them. So the enemy actually looking pretty thin on the ground now. They've got their general and their artillery back here. The artillery still pounding the hill, not having any influence on the battle. The general just facing the wrong way and doing pretty much nothing. And they've lost most of their infantry, and that's very important in a fort battle, of course, because all they can do now is use their remaining infantry to try and take one of my gates, to use the rest of their cavalry to get in. I'm trying to hit that infantry unit with the mortars, and it was around this time in the battle that I'm realizing a curious fact that seems to be true about the mortars, which is that when they fire at targets which are quite close to them, they're extremely inaccurate. You can see the shots here just landing all over the place, nowhere near the actual target, whereas earlier when they were firing at stuff at their maximum range, they were pinpoint accurate. So that seems to be the reason mortars are deadly. They're deadly only at really long range. So right now that means these mortars aren't going to be of much use to me, which is a massive shame. So my infantry are going to just sit on the wall now, manning the guns to fire at some of the enemy's cav as they run away. The enemy are just firing at me, and because I'm on the wall they're not going to do anything, so I'll just let them use their ammo. I'm not going to bother trying to engage them. My men looked like they were firing at something, which was confusing me here. There were no men out there, but they were still loading and just firing out into the open, and I realised it's because the enemy have got this really cheeky move going on. They've got men, including non-routing men, standing right up against the base of the fort so that my troops can't see them, but because they're actually in range, the fire at will AI means they'll just fire at the floor and start using up my own ammo. So we're going to have to stop our men from doing that basically, because as you can see it's not killing any of those troops. So now a bit later on, I decided to try and use my infantry to target the enemy's remaining irregulars down there and start taking them out. But as I did that, that triggered some movements from the guys who are in hiding. Some of them are regulars themselves, who are going to come out and start trying to get some flanking fire on my unit up there. But again, going to really struggle to actually hit anything, so I'm pretty much safe to just ignore them. Those irregulars as well are going to gun battle with my men. That's absolutely perfect, locking them in position, so we're just going to rain arrows and shot upon them, using the mortars to target those nearby cav. So far I haven't managed to kill any of those cavalry who are just waiting for an opportunity to come inside the fort. Not going to happen unless these men can open a gate, and right now they're actually routing. Most of their troops left though, so that means very shortly after this they just came back from routing for another go. And here they are, taking artillery fire as they come in, and curiously they're doing the animation for a melee charge. Normally they run like this when they're about to slam your men onto the ground, and it seems they're actually trying to do that, but they're just running straight into the artillery fort's wall. So not the most competent attack, although you'll see in a moment there is a little hidden agenda there. Over here my musketmen have driven off a few of the enemy's men from that little sneaky position, but still some frontiersmen standing up against the wall, avoiding my shot and drawing my friendly fire bullet bait. So I'm going to tell my men not to fire and just look at them. I'm going to have a stare off. So now the main part of the fight is going to be my archers versus their irregulars. Their cavalry are going to be the target of my mortars, not that I'm expecting them to hit anything at this stage. The cannons on the artillery fort's wall somehow able to fire basically 90 degrees downwards into the enemy, so doing some damage there. But really this blob of enemies that was doing nothing was like a distraction, because actually they were doing something. Another part of their unit had come around the corner to climb up the ropes that I wasn't occupying, and as you can see I didn't notice in the battle until they were already up, so that was pretty inconvenient. Those archers are now going to have to draw out axes and start going into melee with the irregulars, a unit against which they have no particular advantage. If the irregulars can win, they stand a chance of capturing a piece of the fort to open the gates up and try and use their cavalry advantage against me, but of course I can bring my line infantry to fight with these guys in melee if we need to. So we'll see the rest of that and some more interesting glitches in the next episode. The huge success of the West India Company had brought the East India Company into internal disrepute. Although the EIC had been far more effective than the projects of other nations to control trade in the Eastern Hemisphere, it had failed to achieve any of the military ambitions held by the States General in Amsterdam. Since the company charter held them responsible for their own military power, it was up to their directors to find the forces needed to make a name for their organisation. But, confined to Ceylon, they lacked the ability to source European arms or to construct large ships. and they lacked the easy targets that had propelled Van Nassau to fame in America, making war an extremely dangerous route to recognition. Thanks for watching. I hope you'll join me to see how our second major war with Spain goes in the next episode of Sinews of War.